welcome to the Post Point, where we here at the Puyallup Post talk about whatever we feel like, really. I'm Stephen Gonzalez, the editor-in-chief.
And I'm Victor Filion, the videographer.
And I'm Samantha Allred, the reporter.
I'm Kiera Anderson, a photojournalist.
Today it's gonna be a bit more by the books here, trying to set the standard of what we're covering. And today's issue is kind of an open-ended concept of safety and how that might have changed in today's age. I think right now we're in this very interesting political climate where two kind of serious issues have come across around the same time, and both political parties are against the issue, yet they're also defending someone on the other end of that issue. We have the situation with James Gunn and how he had to step down from directing Guardians of the Galaxy 3 because of something that came up from his past. And then we have the situation with Kavanaugh and how everybody's really up in arms on the left side of things because they feel like an injustice has been committed. And while I'm not here to point fingers in one way or the other, I do think both situations bring about this interesting point about safety and about permanency and how that's changed in today's landscape. Now that there's social media and all these different forms on the internet that keep us grounded, and you have to watch everything you say and do at any given moment. I mean, Vic, you're 18?
Yeah.
You might make a tweet tomorrow that can affect the job you have 5 years from now, and they'll fire you for it. That's an interesting landscape to be in, where it almost feels like you're not allowed to make the mistakes that are expected of you as a teenager anymore. What do you think about that?
I agree with that, and I think not only that, I think we live in a society where it's more so guilty until proven innocent, not innocent until proven guilty. And I just think accusations really, in general, just get kind of blown out of proportion in today's society. Whether that's a good thing or bad thing, I guess that's what we're going to kind of talk about. But yeah, I personally don't necessarily agree, specifically with the James Gunn situation, considering the fact that Disney themselves had a track record in the past of doing some pretty racial things, and then I guess they kind of forgive themselves and whatnot, but then they go off and fire James Gunn for past things as he's done when they, in a way, have done the same exact thing,
What do you ladies think? How do you feel about the concept that anything you do online can be held against you years and years down the line?
Well, personally, I feel like we're always taught from an early age to be really careful of what you put on social media because what you post on there is there forever. We've all been told that, so I just think that something that we're all told shouldn't be such a huge issue that we have to deal with now.
I think that the fact that the internet is kind of a history of who we are is absolutely an interesting fact, and we should take that into account in this day and age.
Okay, that's fair. So before we go any further, let's kind of give a rundown of these two scenarios we're trying to compare. Vic, do you feel comfortable giving us the walkthrough of the James Gunn incident?
Yeah, so pretty much what happened was when James Gunn kind of got started with his career, he was trying to be like this kind of edgy type of comedian, so he would post these controversial type of tweets as jokes on Twitter. And when the first Guardians of the Galaxy came out, these tweets surfaced, and he apologized for them, which kind of just makes it weird that when they resurfaced again recently, it actually had an effect on his career. So I think there's a difference between saying something as a joke that's kind of edgy and controversial and actually having some meaning behind those things. What he said wasn't right, but at the same time, he doesn't stand by those statements as a person. They were just kind of edgy jokes that he just said.
That was a really interesting thought, Victor. I think that when someone says something, even if it's in the past, it can really affect people, and therefore we need to be careful no matter what we're doing or saying.
So on the other side of this, we have the issue with Brett Kavanaugh, and for reference, this is going to be a very small, condensed version of this. We're not exactly going to sit here and go point for point with everything that happened, but just for a quick run through of it, July 9th was when President Donald Trump nominated Kavanaugh for the Supreme Court. It wasn't too long after that, somewhere around late July, that this situation with Christine Ford came to light, which allegedly stated that in 1980, at a party, she was sexually assaulted by Brett Kavanaugh, which is a pretty big deal in and of itself, not to disregard the entire fact that he's supposed to be nominated for the Supreme Court. Now, when this all came, forward, obviously, fast forward to where we are now, he's taking the seat and he's been proven not guilty, and we are where we stand right now. And whether or not people feel good or bad about the situation, I find the most interesting fact is that in both of these scenarios, both of these men were painted as the quote-unquote bad guy. And on one side of it, the bad guy, James Gunn, got punished for it. But on the other side of things, the bad guy, Brett Kavanaugh, didn't. I find it very interesting to sort of paint the picture of the state of our country right now and how what I think objectively is the more serious situation, regardless of whether or not it actually happened, kind of got, the situation was sort of alleviated. Whereas the other situation, which I'm not going to say is irrelevant, but is far more minor by comparison, he was immediately smacked down for, and he immediately had to step down. Especially with, like you said, like Disney is not exactly well known for being all-inclusive throughout their inception.
And something that, like, you do those two comparisons, but something that kind of was a little more, it wasn't too recent, but PewDiePie saying the N-word on his live stream, and YouTube pretty much just, like, canceling his show and all that, and all the advertisers leaving him. And then YouTube still supports the Paul brothers when Logan Paul, filmed a dead body hanging from a tree, and has just like controversial track record of doing all these things, but they still have like all their contracts, all their TV shows and whatnot. And I just think that's just kind of interesting.
See, what strikes me as odd, and it's something that, Carrie, you brought up at the start of this, was that you said that you were taught from a young age that anything you say on social media stays with it, and you have to be responsible and understand what you're doing. I was raised during the era when social media became a thing, so that wasn't something we were taught growing up. We were taught the obvious, watch what you say and everything, but we're in an age now where if you, share a meme or something that could be viewed as controversial, that stays with you. I just find it interesting that theoretically when your generation is raised, they're taught this, and the generation that's theoretically suffering from this would be the one either just before mine or once back where the internet wasn't a thing, and it appears as though they're just having trouble adapting to the new permanency that's going on.
I think that an interesting way to take it is to kind of view the whole thing is like from an employer standpoint. Steven, you hired us all. If you had to go through our social medias and seeing that we're posting like racial things, like just as jokes and whatnot, like would that have like changed your mind of if you were gonna hire us or not?
Well, for starters, I did go through your social medias, and here you are still. It's hard because I can see both sides of the issue. On the one hand, James Gunn's like joking tweets don't exactly bar him from his ability to direct those movies. But on the other hand, now that he's in a position where he's an influential human being, he is obligated to use that as a platform for responsible behaviors. You don't use that to start preaching, racial thoughts and whatnot. But again, it's not like he was born into that platform. Mm-hmm. I find it hard to hold him accountable for something at the level he was at before. It's hard to say like, oh, Vic, you're gonna be a big time star. Like I can assume that. So because of that, I'm going to hold you accountable now. That way in the future, when you do have that influence, you use it correctly. And that's, in not so many words, that's kind of what the message we're getting from this is, that you need to watch what you say now, because in the future, you never know who you might influence, which is not incorrect, but it's not something that I can just be like, oh yeah, for sure, like that's where I want to stay.
Also, something is, I think the same people who are like bashing James Gunn and whatnot are the same people who are just like, who kind of state the fact that, people can change, but like, how can people change if you're like accusing them of things that they stated or did like in their past, Like obviously James Gunn has evolved as a human for the better, and that was in his past, but why are we like devaluing him and treating him as if like he put those tweet outs today,
That's a fair point.
Do we know how long ago in the past he tweeted these?
It was like 10 years ago.
10 years ago?
It's a pretty long time for change. They say we change every day, so 10 years. That's a bit of a distance.
How old is he now?
James Gunn?
30s?
I'll look. 30s? You get back to us on that. While we're doing that, question for you. I'm assuming out of the four of us, you're the most active on social media. That's just a total guess, unless Sammy says otherwise. But yeah.
I mean, I feel like Vic posts like once a day, but yeah.
I have a really fun
So,
life.
When you're looking at something and you're choosing whether or not to share it or retweet it or whatnot, what kind of goes into your head to decide that?
Well, what goes into my head is I know that tons of people are going to see this. Whether or not they interact with it, they're going to see it. And I want to portray the way I want people to see me out of social media the same way they would see me in social media. So if there's this tweet that says words that I wouldn't say out loud to real people, face to face, I wouldn't retweet it, like it, share it, comment on it. Like, I don't want that to be associated with me. That's just something that I follow because as I said earlier, that's just what I was taught as a child.
It really is a matter of maturity. I feel like what we say really defines who we are, and so we need to be careful about it, especially on social media since it stays around for a long time.
And this is a question pretty much for all of you. Would you say that your social platforms, whichever one you use the most, Instagram, Facebook, Twitter, whatever, would you say that, like you just mentioned, is just a projection of who you are, or do you use that as a platform for your personal views? Like, could I discover your political stance through your social media and your religious stance and your thoughts on morality, or is it just a place where you just kind of kick back?
I don't think you can make one blanket statement about every single person. Me personally, you might be able to uncover a couple of those details about me based on what I post, and you can tell, like, politically where I might swing, what values I might have, but I don't think you can assume that everybody's social media is going to be like that. People have pages that they've created purely for memes and enjoyment, and those memes don't maybe reflect, like, anything about them. They're just supposed to be funny, and they know the majority of people will think they're funny. It's not something that you can just apply to everybody. You have to take into consideration each account, what the account's for, things like that.
And there's also an account called LinkedIn, I believe, and it's a business account where you can put your best foot forward. And for me personally, I believe that if someone was looking through my Facebook page, they would just see things that I like, and maybe they would see a few personal thoughts that I have, but I don't think it'd be very controversial.
For me, I treat my social media kind of like what you were talking about, Steven. Like, as I kind of want to be a filmmaker, so I'm kind of like, I treat my social medias as a portfolio. I just post my work on there and whatnot. I guess for Facebook, when the whole James Gunn thing happened, which he's 50, he's 52 by the way.
Wow, he's way
That's
older than I thought he was.
yeah.
Yeah. But when the whole James Gunn thing was happening and there was a bunch of articles, I did make a little post about it, just kind of my feelings, because I just share a lot of movie stuff on my Facebook and just share a lot of trailers and whatnot. But for like my Instagram and Snapchat and I mainly just post my portfolio work or just like whatever I'm doing that day. Nothing's necessarily like any kind of political opinion or anything like that.
Now, before I get to an interesting point I just thought of from what you said, another question for you all. Do you think by using social media you are obligated to convey your political and religious interests for the betterment of that party you're a part of?
I don't personally think you're obligated to do anything when it comes to social media. I think that it might be nice for you to do certain things, but you're not obligated to do anything, really.
People can have really strong opinions, and they want to share them. And since social media is kind of like a screen, you don't see the person, you can just spout out all your feelings and your thoughts, and this can really trap a lot of people.
So something that the way I think of this thing is like, I kind of want to have an audience whenever like I'm trying to build up an audience like with my YouTube channel and whatnot. I feel like if I ever specify any of my own political beliefs or whatnot, that is a chance to split that audience part, like whether it be a small chunk or a bigger one, that would just split them off a bit. But yeah, I don't think it's necessary. You don't have to put your political beliefs on social media. For the most part, like I have family and friends who will do that, and it's fine and all. I don't necessarily am interested in their thoughts, but I guess the only type of problem I have is if someone's like super political and that's the only thing they post, then I'd probably just like block them from my feed. I would still be friends with them, but I just wouldn't want them in my feed because I'm like, I don't care.
See, both you, Kiki, and Sammy, you connected this thought that's come to me now, this concept of the anonymity we have online and how that can be utilized for things like this. Like you mentioned joke pages, and how people have pages where they will, they'll troll and they'll be just purposely belligerent to get a rise out of people, and they find humor in that, and people will enjoy that, and they're kind of protected by that because they're hiding behind a moniker that they don't have to hold themselves accountable by. James Gunn was hiding behind nothing. That's him. He was projecting himself in such a way, but he was still trying to use that as a platform for jokes that might not land properly with everyone. So what do you all think about that? Do you think that, first of all, do you think that even has a place on the internet, that sort of kind of what I think most people would consider lowbrow humor? And if you do you think that's the kind of thing that can only be like set up through these joking pages so they can utilize that anonymity?
Here's my thing, a little off topic for a second, but when James Gunn posted those tweets, that was in a different time period, It's like those kind of jokes probably weren't as controversial then than they are now in today's society.
I definitely agree in the fact that it was a different time period, obviously, and that different stigmas and things that people follow and understand nowadays were not things that people understood or followed back then. And I think that it is a lot to try and hold somebody accountable for something that was so different. But I also think that, as we said, he's like 50
52.
52. I also think that as a 40-year-old man, if these were said 10 years ago, you should have enough maturity, education, and knowledge about the world around you to know what you should and shouldn't be posting as a adult in America.
Stephen, could you restate your question?
So, I'm trying to think of a good example off the top of my head, but like on Facebook, for instance, there are pages set up pretending to be fictional characters or just with long strung out names, and those pages are essentially pages where people just share memes, or they post statuses that will typically annoy and frustrate people, and just they gaslight them, which is another way of just getting a rise out of people, getting them angry on purpose so that for others' entertainment. And do you think, considering that makes up, I'm not going to throw any figures out there, but I think a good chunk of the internet, do you think that that's something that needs to be rectified, or do you think that's something that just sort of needs to be have its jurisdiction of, you can do this behind your anonymity, sure, but if you are a celebrity or a person of interest that the world watches, you shouldn't be allowed to utilize your platforms in such a way?
Well, yeah, as a celebrity and someone of political power, you really do need to be careful because the public is going to watch your every move. And that's what you signed up for when you went into your job. So, yeah, I do believe that you do need to be careful. And I don't think it's a great habit to try to rile people up. And it just makes people angry, and I don't see how there's anything good in that.
Now, what strikes me as interesting from that is that one of the first examples that comes to mind of someone who is utilizing their social media account in a way to get people emotionally invested and is probably not being as professional as they could be would be our commander-in-chief of this country. Because Trump's tweets have just they've taken up
they turn into
many
memes.
media spaces. They've taken up so many different media spaces.
Memes at this point.
We're in this really odd age where the leader of the free world will make directives and appoint, news and do all these different things in the characters provided through Twitter, and it's an interesting position. And I'm inclined to agree with what you said, Sammy. But that being said, it makes the fact that Trump's doing what he's doing all the more flagrant and, very superior in that no one should be doing this but me. And that's an interesting stance to be made.
Back to what you said, I remember I found this out a while ago and I just thought it was funny. So there is a meme page I follow, and a celebrity, she was in Kick-Ass and some other stuff, she also follows that same meme page, and the meme page posts like more edgier kind of memes. So I feel like that's the way I do it. Like I don't necessarily like repost any type of memes or anything, but I follow a bunch of meme pages that like do post the kind of humor I'm into, and if they're really funny, I'll save them and then share them with my friends. But I don't necessarily like reshare them or post them or anything like that, because I know that like this kind of sense of humor is suitable for me, but I know my mom's not gonna like, laugh at this.
I mean, you can't tell people what they can and can't like. I mean, we all have dark humor moments. Whether it was your joke, you laughed at someone else's joke. I mean, it's inevitable. It's gonna happen, and there's nothing we can do about it. I just think that people should be more aware of what they're sharing to everyone and not just the people that they're comfortable sharing with.
Mm-hmm.
I think if they were more aware of what they were saying, they wouldn't say the crude or, dark humor as you said it.
So, hypothetical theory, because once again, I'm no judge, jury, or executioner. Let's say that Brett Kavanaugh is guilty of what he did. And let's compare that once more under the confines we've just created, in that understanding that you, under a position of influence, should be held accountable for your actions, and comparing that to what we were talking about with the James Gunn tweets. By that rationale, Brett Kavanaugh, do you think that he should, do you think that it was handled properly, I suppose is what I'm saying?
No. If he was guilty of what he did, there's no reason he should still be anywhere near power. Like, at all. There's no reason. I don't care how educated you are. If that's the type of human being you are, that is not where you should be in power.
So, let's rephrase the question. Does anyone here think that the situation was handled the way it should have across the board?
Well, I haven't really read up on the situation, but like, how was it presented really? Like, did he go to court and whatnot?
He did. We have a very by the numbers, justice system. We utilize it across the board for everyone evenly. However, our justice system has been proven to fail in the past.
Beyond.
We have statistics
Unfair.
for people that were wrongly sent to prison and whatnot. So is it possible that he did do what he did and he got away with it? Yes. But under the confines of the evidence that was presented and how they went about it, he was proven not guilty.
I guess another question is, like, how was this first kicked off? Was it just because he got nominated for something, or is it because someone came out and said this?
And see, you bring to mind a good point that I've been thinking ever since, I don't know, last year. Last year we had this point where celebrities were getting dimed out like every other month, when this Bill Cosby thing was coming about. Morgan Freeman got in trouble for something not too long ago. Aziz Ansari. People are constantly getting pulled out. And it seems like it's happening after they've reached positions of influence and power, which I find odd. And so here we are with Brett Kavanaugh, nominated for the Supreme Court, and almost immediately thereafter, somebody's come to light to claim that they were wronged by him.
That's another thing that I'm kind of thinking about is, like, okay, if he would have never been, like, nominated for this kind of
Would
position.
that have happened?
No, it wouldn't
my
have probably.
question.
It's like, yeah, he could have, if he did it, he would have just got away with it. No one even would have brought it up. But now that he's, like, in the spotlight for this position, that's when everyone decides to come forward,
I think it has to do with the fact that he was going into a position of power. That really does make someone want to say something. But beforehand, when he wasn't in so much power, women don't really, I can't speak for all women, but it's not a fun thing to say that you've been sexually assaulted. And so many of the women who did say that they were sexually assaulted got a lot of backlash about it, because people do assume that they were going for a political reason. That's why they stated it. But if someone's going into power, you want to speak up if something wrong has happened by him, even if it was a long time ago.
So, in the military, we cover sexual assault and prevention pretty regularly, about once a month. And one of the big things that came about around the time I was in was the transfer from that message of no means no to yes means yes. Because it's not the same thing.
Mm-hmm.
Because depending on the circumstances, someone might not say no because they're afraid. They might not say no because they're having an out-of-body experience and they're just away from the situation. They might disassociate. There's a lot of reasons why someone might not have the courage to actually express the fact that they don't want to be a part of this. However, aside from, blatant coercion, if someone is interested in the advances and they make the other person aware of that, they're like, yes, I want to do this, it's pretty evident that that's a sign for the green light. So I think in today's day and age, the general consensus isn't that, oh, they didn't say no, so it's okay. It's, oh, they said yes, they were clearly involved. And they're two totally different circumstances, honestly. But I struggle to, like, Sammy brought to mind a good point that he was about to reach a position of power, and if he did what he did, the victims involved thought to themselves, we can't allow a person like that to be on this platform where they can reach people the way they do. That, to me, makes all the sense in the world. Mm-hmm. But when I juxtapose that to celebrities that are not in positions of power, so to speak, but positions of influence, I have to wonder why we've hit this wave where it's happened this past year. This wave has occurred where everyone's getting shot down for everything, and it's reached a point where it's not on celebrities anymore. It's not on people in political parties. Like, YouTubers are getting smacked down. Just various people are getting smacked down. How often do you see a video just thrown on your Facebook or something of, insert person here does insert act here at insert place here, and it gets shared and it goes viral, and all of a sudden we all have a say on how this parent should be parenting their child or how this kid shouldn't have been doing that. And it's weird how many people's hands are in your pot while you're cooking at home,
So, you stated that that celebrities aren't really in power, but they do have influence. But it's my belief that influence is power. And I believe that is why people are, as you stated, smacking down the celebrities and pointing out the flaws that they have, because they do influence their children, or they could influence, the people who were watching. They could influence anyone. And so I think it is the reason why we should not do that.
I'm at a little bit of a disagreement in the sense that, like, I don't think that people who are like celebrities should be responsible for what their fans do. Like, if you say, man, I really hate this musician, like, he just doesn't make that good music, and then one of your fans goes off and, like, physically assaults that musician, is that your fault? Like, you just kind of stated your opinion, like, you know what, I don't really like his music that much, and then everyone just starts, like, trashing on this person and throwing him under the bus. I don't think that's your fault. I just think that some people take information differently. And kind of relating to, like, the whole video games can make you violent thing. I play video games all the time. I have no, like, violent tendencies to do anything, but someone who has, like, a few mental problems or whatnot can play a video game. And me personally, I don't think video games make you violent at all. I just think that's kind of a dumb claim. I feel like that's just society trying to, like, throw the video game industry underneath the bus, But I feel like same thing with video games. They should not be responsible for what their community does,
Another example that comes to mind, and I'm going to date myself here, is there was this book called Catcher in the Rye, and it had this huge controversy about it because somebody was murdered, and the murderer claimed they did it because they felt this connection through this book to do so. And there became this whole concept, is this book leading people to murder? And I think it has a lot to do with interpretation, whether we're talking about books or video games or celebrities who, in a lot of instances, we're talking about actors, musicians, which, create art for us to consume. It has a lot to do with your interpretation of the matter. Someone in a position like Brett Kavanaugh is in a specific position of power. They can create things. They can abolish things. They will affect how you and I get to, go about our daily lives. Something like a book does not have power. It doesn't even really have influence. It's all about how I perceive it. Something like an actor has influence, and in a lot of instances I would agree that influence is power, but they only have influence over me if I give them the power to do so. I don't care what James Franco has to say because I don't revere James Franco in any way. I don't care what Bradley Cooper has to say. He's my favorite actor, but I don't listen to him and assume what he says should apply to me because I enjoy his content. I don't think it's exactly the same thing.
So I think oftentimes that whenever there is a big issue going on, people automatically look for someone or something to blame. And it's a lot easier to put blame on something that can't fight back. For say like a book, a phone, a video game. These are all things that obviously are not live, like they can't talk, they can't speak, they can't move. So now you put blame on something that can't defend itself, I guess, and that way it's a lot easier to make all these objective statements about these things. Video games do this, this book does this, because it obviously, I mean, it's a thing, it can't defend itself. Whereas if you say, like, this person is causing this, that person can refute, then you have a bigger argument in all these points, and it's a lot harder to put blame on something that way. So people just automatically try to put blame on these objects when in reality it's not always the objects, it's the people using the objects, and it's the way that we perceive people and society and norms and things like that. When you say video games make people violent, that's not true. A video game is a video game. The person who's playing the video game, it determines whether or not they become a violent person. I mean, I love playing video games myself. I don't maybe play as much as you would expect a gamer to play, but I still enjoy them, and I'm not like a violent person. That has no correlation to me either. It's just a thing. If I maybe have something going on at home, if I have something going on at work, something going on mentally, and there's something maybe that's not considered like societally normal, maybe it'll affect me in a certain way, but until then, like, you can't just be like, oh yeah, video games are the cause for all of our violent problems and we should just burn them all. Like, you can't make that objective statement until you've gotten into the nitty-gritty details of what's going on.
I absolutely agree that we should not blame other people or things for what we do. However, it does not change the fact that we are surrounded by books and television and video games. And even though if we don't feel exactly like these are affecting us in any way, me personally, I think that they do affect us. Because you can take, for instance, Photoshop. You can take, for instance, Photoshop. Women, when they saw those advertisements, they felt like they weren't good enough, and so they decided that they needed to change. And it was from what they were influenced. They were influenced by those billboards and magazines and actors and actresses.
But then again, I think that the same thing applies. It's not Photoshop's fault. It's not the people that are doing Photoshop's fault. It's like society and the way they want Photoshop and people to look. That's like what we have Photoshop for, is to change the things we think are perfect. That's what we do it for. We change the way lighting is, we change the way people look, we change the way hair looks. I mean, all of that, that's what it's for.
Something that is kind of funny. Before I got my license, I always took Uber everywhere, and me and my Uber driver had like a conversation about like how music influences people, because like Marilyn Manson at the time, like when the Columbine shooting happened, the media blamed him for it because the shooters listened to his music. And he brought up an interesting point where he was all like, I don't think that's true or anything, but I think music does attract a certain crowd. So if you play rap music at the front of your establishment, you're going to get a crowd that enjoys that music just to hang out like in that area. If you're playing just classical piano music, obviously, like, those kind of people won't hang out over there. And I just think that's kind of like an interesting point, because it's kind of true when you just kind of live like in a small neighborhood, and like if you're at a gas station, if they're playing like the music you listen to, there's more of a likely chance that you're going to go over there and hang out and whatnot.
So to sort of wrap this all up and get us back on the final leg of this track, we've kind of agreed, we've kind of all reached a consensus that people of influence and power should be held accountable for their actions, whether we're talking about the James Gunns, the Brett Kavanaughs, what have you. That being said, how far back is the proper amount to hold someone accountable? At what age can we say, okay, this is where we draw the line? Anything beyond here was you growing up and making mistakes, but from here on, you're going to be held accountable for all of your actions. Where do we draw that line?
After high school. I say after high school because here's the thing. There was a time freshman year where I was just like the super edgy kid who just like said a lot of messed up things. Freshman, sophomore year, and then I got into Running Start. The community was a lot more mature and whatnot. I'm like, you know what, I like this. And it kind of just made me mature more. And then I turned 18, and I just feel like I think about what I say more often, and I think about what I'm going to post more often, I have a different stance on how people perceive me. So I think after high school, because high school you're still going through all your hormones and whatnot, and you're just trying to like fit into this popular crowd. So you're just trying to fit in high school. You're just trying to exist, and in order to do that, you have to stand out in some kind of way, whether that be like doing some physical harm to like the school, or just saying something super edgy and whatnot, and just trying to get that attention.
I think that we all are going to make mistakes in life, and there is no cutoff point when we stop making mistakes, period.
You say the end of high school, which typically is 17 to 18 range. As a 24-year-old, I just looked up to confirm that statistically the brain isn't fully developed until 25. You're still dealing with, your hormone imbalances, your own deficiencies, who you are as an individual, and essentially you're still warranted to make some mistakes until you're 25, which means I still have one more year where I can screw up without any problems. But what I'm saying is, if that's what's been scientifically backed, and you say 18 and on, I'm curious, James Gunn was in his 40s when this happened. So we can look at this and say he should definitely be held accountable for that. Brett Kavanaugh was in college when what he did happened. So that warrants somewhere between 18 to 25 when this was happening for him. Scientifically, we would be able to make the argument that his brain wasn't fully developed. However, we've raised the severity of the situation between the two. We went from talking about, hurtful tweets to sexual assault. Just like when a minor does something bad, they go to juvenile detention. But if a kid kills someone, that raises the ladder again.
Mm-hmm. What I was going to kind of start off my answer with was it's a question that's looking for a blanket answer when there isn't a blanket answer to be given. You can't really give an age for something when everybody goes through different life experiences and matures at different ages, and there's just so many different variables that it's really hard to come up with one concise age or like time frame to just be like, oh, from now on you're held accountable. If we had a way to do this, it would be like super complex and would need a lot of time and effort to fix all the little bugs. But in reality, the best way to determine when someone's mature enough to be held accountable for their decisions would be when you think they've gone through something in their life that increases like their maturity level. If someone has gone through all of high school and not had to go through any sort of hard issue and has been given everything, and maybe they're just not the most mature or ready for life, then they can't be on that same accountability as someone who's been living on the streets and going through really hard times and had to get jobs and maybe knows the consequences of their actions based on what they've had to go through.
Well, thanks for joining us today, guys. Again, I'm Steven Gonzalez.
I'm Victor Filion.
I'm Samantha Allred.
And I'm Kier Anderson.
And we'll see you on the next episode.